Welcome to another episode of the Business Blumin podcast. We've got an incredible show planned today. Our guest is awesome. He's got a really interesting life journey. He is a former Marine. He's got a lot of diverse career achievements, which we'll jump into. But he is Shawn Murphy. Shawn, how you doing today?
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate you having me on. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Definitely a pleasure. Had some good conversations off the air, and we have a lot to talk about. But just to get started, can you speak a little bit about your upbringing, your background, kind of what formed you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, grew up in East Baltimore. Um, let's see, I was born back in no, but no, grew up in East Baltimore. Only child, single parent home. Parents divorced when I was 11, but dad was in the picture, but not heavily in the picture. Mostly raised by my mom. Um, did well in school. I was an honor roll student, but wasn't setting the world on fire. Even back then, I was the kid who I hate homework. I'm very anti-homework person. I'm of that mindset of if you couldn't get your job done at work while we were at your work, why are you sending it home with me to have to go do more? But that was my early childhood. But like I said, I had a lot of cousins, people like that in my life that I spent a lot of time with. And then age 17, I packed up I shouldn't say packed, but at age 17, on my 17th birthday, I can actually tell you the exact day, July 20th. 1993, I went with my mother to the recruiter's office. We filled out the paperwork for me to join the Marine Corps. July 21st, I swore in. And then 1 year later, July 6th of 94, I went off to Paris Island and was there for boot camp and everything else, and did another 20 years of my life in the Marine Corps.
Got it. Yeah, and an interesting backstop, and we'll definitely get into kind of more depth of your career journey. But on that note, kind of, what was the decision, or like, what was going through your head when you decided to join the Marines, or kind of, how did you come to that decision?
So I always knew I was going to do something of a service oriented. I always just had that vibe for myself.
Like military service, or like
Military service.
career?
I mean, heck, at one point in time, I thought about the clergy, um, but I then discovered girls, and that didn't work out.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what everyone
but
says.
yeah, that's kind of how it happened for me. Um, that wasn't going to be the lifestyle for me. But I just always knew. I had one grandfather in the Army, another grandfather in the Navy. But I think the big influence that finally kind of pushed me over the edge of the Marine Corps was my mom dated a guy who was a Marine Corps pilot during Vietnam. And he had the most incredible stories. And he was a badass, didn't take shit from nobody. He was that guy. And, but he had all these, and he was definitely of that era. Like, he drank warm Pabst Blue Ribbon every day. I remember being like, what? And like, I've never seen anybody drink warm beer. And his story was, in Vietnam, they didn't have refrigerators. So their beer was always warm. So he got used to drinking warm beer. And that's what he drank, was warm Pabst Blue Ribbon. And I just remember always thinking that this dude was tougher than woodpecker lips. And this is who I wanted to be and how I wanted to be treated. So that's where my influence to it came.
Got it. No, that's interesting. It's probably one of those things when he first drank like that warm beer, probably tasted like crap, and then over time just kind of became accustomed to it. And then, as a normal person, you're looking at it like, I can't believe you did that. And then he's like, he's probably just like, that's how we did it back in my day.
That's it. His name was Ed, and that was Ed's way. Is he drank warm Pabst Blue Ribbon?
Got it.
Always had warm Pabst Blue.
Almost like he could have started a brand called Ed's Warm Pabst Blue.
It could have been.
A,
Nowadays he'd have been called eclectic or some shit like that nobody would have thought of at the time. Now he'd have been a Renaissance man of some sort.
Got it. No, well, that's it's really interesting to hear. So, quick note on that: did you know you wanted to do the Marines specifically, or like were you thinking about doing something in the Navy or the SEALs or something like that?
Well, never anything like the SEALs. I was never like, it was never like, I need to go ahead and swim through all night and go get the bad guys. It was never any of those things. I just knew service. I wanted to join the service. I wanted to kind of move around. And the Army never really crossed my mind. Was never piqued my interest. The Navy did for a little bit. because of having a grandfather that was in the Navy. Even my other grandfather was in the Army. The one that was in the Army had nothing positive to say about it. Really, he was a very, interestingly enough, and people can look up this. He was very anti-Red Cross because he had stories about, watching American service members, hurt and dying, and Red Cross providing aid to enemy combatants first. And he was and who knows what those stories were. I mean, this was, that's the way he saw it. But, and then my other grandfather being in the Navy, he was a hardworking, blue collar, kind of guy that could fix anything. You name it, he could fix it. He probably had 75 bolts that fit to it and whatever else sitting in his garage. But, I always envied that idea of him, and he could always work with his hands. But really what it came down to was I was a kid that was 5'7.5", 127 pounds, and I needed to learn how to kill people with my thumb, which didn't happen per se, but that was kind of my Marine Corps mindset. That's how Ed had built the Marine Corps up into this animal, this process of, you're going to learn discipline, and you're going to learn how to fight, and you're going to learn how to, do all the, and that's what I expected boot camp to be like. It is not like that in any way, shape, or form. It's not.
Well, what was boot camp like?
It is the most miserable, horrible, dreadful thing you'll ever do in your life, and you'll praise yourself for it every day. Absolutely the best thing I ever did. So, and the first 3 weeks are the worst of it. And that's because you can think about anything you've ever done in your life, whether it's starting a new school, starting a new job, moving to a new place, new apartment, whatever it is. If you think about it, the first 3 weeks of that thing are absolute misery. But right around week 3.5, all of a sudden the routine kicks in. And boot camp was the same way. Were there times after that 3.5 weeks it sucked more than the other ones? Absolutely. I mean, I can remember sitting in an iron chair, which was just basically squatting down with your arms out in front of you without sitting in a real chair, and sweat dripping from my fingertips while your arms are straight out in front of you. So that means the sweat was coming from my fingertip pores, not from my arms. Like, I remember things like that, but it was one of the best things. It's molded everything I do. I mean, I'll flip it back to you, Daniel, for a second.
Sure.
In your head, what's the toughest thing you've ever done in your life physically?
So this is like a trick answer, but I have like a really rigorous ab workout that I do. And I mean, even though I do it like 3 times a week, it's still really tough. So not to get into kind of every single thing, but one of it's like I do a 3.5 minute plank with 10 pounds on my back. And that's like brutal. I mean, I can't imagine like how that to me is so tough. I can't imagine like that times 1,000.
No, here's a perfect example though. How many times in a day, if somebody brings up working out, do you reference that?
Like if someone just asked me about working out in general.
If somebody said, dude, I went to the gym today and I was like really lifting heavy, do you reference, hey, I do planks for 3 minutes with 10 pounds on my back? You reference it, don't it?
Probably, yeah.
Because that's your level point that you've set for yourself for physical challenges. Now, if tomorrow you moved that to 25 pounds, you upped your game and you put it in between your shoulder blades, you would say to yourself, man, I've upped it. You would tell everybody that you've upped it. And if I said to you, man, I started doing 10 pounds, you would say, man, I remember when I did 10 pounds. Now I do 25. You'll get there too. So boot camp at age 17, for me, when I went to boot camp, I was 17. I turned 18 in boot camp. I already had set myself my personal physical and mental stress level that for the rest of my life, I had a level to get beyond. I always had a level. Did I do things more physical, more stressful? Probably. But this was my new baseline. And you have your baseline. It's you said it right away. That ab workout is your baseline for something physical.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that was my baseline, and that's how I created that moving forward.
Got it. Interesting. So do you think that, what do you think overall? I mean, we'll get into more of your career journey, but do you think that what you did in the military was more challenging than anything, or like more specifically in the Marines was more challenging than anything you've had to do professionally?
Yeah, because I've done some interesting things. I was a CSX train master. I was an Amtrak conductor. I've done. I was business development director for a staffing firm, and now I own my own company. And they're all very challenging things, but at no point in any of the stuff that I've done since then could it be. Could somebody could come around right now and go, "Hey, I need you to pack your whole family and your whole business up and move it to California." That's never going to happen. It's not. No one's going to tell me that. There, I could be having the grandest time here, doing everything. Life is great. Kids are enjoying school. Wife's doing good at work. Everybody's happy. And the next day, I could walk in and there's orders sitting there that say, "Hey, California." So that's all. That always sits in your head. So it really makes it difficult. Not super difficult, but it's a challenge to become friends with people who aren't in the services, because it's hard to explain to people that this is your life. So that was always a big challenge. I mean, have I done different stuff? Sure. I mean, but that always kind of stuck in your head.
Got it. No, for sure. I definitely appreciate you showing that point of view, because you're probably so ingrained to kind of the challenges there that, not that other things in your life aren't difficult, but once you've experienced kind of that instant duty or that instant responsibility, other things probably aren't as tedious. So definitely resonate with. Well, one day maybe I'll resonate, but definitely understand where you're coming from. But quick follow into that. That being said, what do you think are the biggest lessons you learned while you were in the military?
Discipline is always there, and it's not discipline like people think, like, that if you're going to do this right now, we're going to make this. It's not that discipline. It's anything that I begin, I need to follow it through. I need to complete it. Whether I'm the last person to finish it or the first person to finish it, I need to follow it through. I also, need to not hoard the knowledge. That was the biggest challenge, I will tell you, I learned getting out of the Marine Corps, is civilians like to hoard the knowledge. They hoard it for themselves. I know this. I can't let Daniel know what I know, because if I teach it to you, then all of a sudden you might become better than me at it, and then I'm going to lose my job. So they hoard the knowledge, which hurts the company, which hurts everyone around them, and no one gets better. Where in the Marine Corps, one of the things I learned was, if I've been here for 5 minutes longer than you, so you and I doing this podcast together, I've never done your podcast before, but I know already that there's a process, there's steps. So the next person that came along, even if you introduced them to me 2 minutes after the show was over, I could say to them, "Hey, this is how Daniel does this," so that they're prepared. So I've got knowledge to pass on, and it's my job to pass it on. So discipline, the ability to teach and pass on knowledge, and that there's probably the other thing is there's one thing in life you can't stop. You know what that is?
Death and taxes.
Time.
Time.
You can't stop time.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't do it. So the one thing I learned in the Marine Corps is this will pass. Whatever however bad it is, this will pass. However good it is, this will pass. So be prepared, take the time, enjoy the moment, deal with the situation, but this will pass. That's probably 3 of the biggest things I learned.
Got it. I think those are definitely very deep. And on one of the notes that you just said, I think I've heard recently on YouTube or kind of on social media, I've seen videos of former Navy SEAL training and how, they have what's known as their hell week, their most challenging week, and how it seems like it's very individualistic. Everyone's just trying to stay mentally tough. But in the back of my head, and in no way am I implying that like I would be a great Navy SEAL or get through training, but it's almost like if you were in that position, wouldn't it almost lift you up and lift everyone else up if you were like, "Hey, don't quit." When like amongst like the trainees, I know that like the trainers and like the actual SEALs are probably yelling curse words and trying to torture everyone for a week. But wouldn't it almost be better if, kind of amongst the people that were in Hell Week were like, "Guys, like, let's all get through this together. Like, don't quit. We're all a unit here." Because I feel like, when you're focused on yourself, you almost burn out. When you try to focus on sharing stuff and making everyone else better, not only it lifts you up, but it lifts everyone else up. If that kind of makes sense.
I can't speak on Navy SEAL training. I will tell you, go read and or listen to David Goggins' book, You Can't Hurt Me.
Mm-hmm.
He really gets into that because he went to BUD/S 3 times before he passed. and he has a very interesting perspective going from being a guy who tried to lead a boat company or boat team and everybody staying together and really pushing to kind of being more, I wouldn't say individual, but realizing that this was his thing he needed to do for himself. It's different. Like, I will tell you, Marine Corps boot camp is a scientific game. It is so scientific. They have it down to a process. The drill instructor's job is to become hated by the recruits. If the drill instructors are hated by the recruits, then you have people from, like, Parris Island is east of the Mississippi. San Diego is west of the Mississippi. So if none of us are from the same places. We might be a handful of people, like 3 to 5 guys that came up in the same area. So we don't have the same thoughts. We didn't grow up in the same household. But if we can all see this one drill instructor who's just being an absolute ass and torturing our lives, now we all have a single point of hatred.
Yeah, that's connection.
So that connects us. We have a single point of hatred.
Mm-hmm.
So you can move forward with that, and you can build that camaraderie. And you see it within boot camp, where folks will, this drill instructor's yelling, "Come on, we can do better than this," and guys will try to, sprout up with some motivation. I'm a very anti-motivation guy, though. I'm very anti-motivation.
Interesting.
Because motivation fades.
Mm-hmm.
Like you do, think about your workout.
Mm-hmm.
If tomorrow all of a sudden you're like, I'm not feeling it enough, you don't have to do it, do you?
No, I don't have to. I mean, I will, but like
you will.
Yeah.
But that's not. You don't do it because of motivation. You do it because of obsession.
That too. Yeah.
Obsession doesn't leave you. Obsession doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm obsessed with something, like I really like rye whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
I like rye whiskey, but I like mine without ice in it. And I think that's the way you drink it. I'm obsessed with that idea. Like, hey, don't water it down. That's how I'm always going to do it.
Okay.
Motivation. I'm motivated to go try something new. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't work out, oh, well, it didn't work out. My motivation failed. Fuck it. That's the big difference.
Got it. That's a great impersonation of like the average try and fail and not keep going after being obsessed. But it's an interesting point that you bring up. So I'm definitely not a psychologist here, but it's almost like, they can be motivated to be in the Marines or do whatever they got to do. But if they're all obsessed with hating the same person, it feels like that may drive them just that much more.
That's it. I'll give you a great example of when I became a recruiter for the Marine Corps. And I recruited for 12 years of my 20 years in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. And I could almost, by the time it was over with, I could tell you the kid that was going to make it and wasn't going to make it. Mm-hmm. The kid that walked into my office that was like, so I think I'm going to go to boot camp. I figure I'll be honor grad, high shooter, high PFT. Probably when it's all said and done, the drill instructors are going to want to be me. That kid didn't make it probably past the first week and a half. My toenail is sprained. I need to leave. And they would. Like and it started with a kid who, that kind of like speak in my office, all these things. As soon as he got to Parris Island, as soon as he got to processing, he looked at the doc and went, my shoulder goes click when I do this. And they went, you're out of here. He came up with a quick excuse. Now I'll flip that. The person that came in my office getting ready for boot camp, and they asked me like, hey Gunny, staff sergeant, whatever I was at the time. Hey, can you tell me about this? How is this going to work? I'm really kind of concerned. They went into it with a healthy, respectful fear. And with that healthy, respectful fear, everything that came at them, they knew that this was going to be bad. They knew how to approach it. They knew they were going to run into these situations. Vice that person that was over the top, like everything's going to be great. That person, the minute they had something bad, they crumble. It's the actor or the neighbor. He was always such a nice guy. He was always so happy. Because they don't know how to handle the stress. They never prepared for stress.
So it's almost like a fearful confidence kind of thing. Like you're going in, but you're scared. And like that fear is almost like that anxiety, like has you more on edge. So you're ready to kind of pursue whatever you got to pursue.
100%.
Got it. Okay. No, cool. It's really insightful and appreciate the conversation around that. But after the Marines, you had like a very natural career transition to working at Amtrak. So I would love to know.
Well, actually, I started off with CSX.
So
that was my first railroad experience. Mm-hmm. am really like I say, opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. They wanted me. I was training to be a frontline manager. Was going through that process, and that was actually the going back to saying, hey, civilians don't want to share the information. That was the first time I experienced that. I came from an environment in the Marine Corps where I needed to know what all my Marines knew, how they were prepared, so I knew if I needed to train them or they were good to go. So I came from that world, so I was used to telling people, all right, yeah, I'm prepared for this, or yeah, I understand that, or yep, I can do that. And I got pulled in by a higher manager. He was a supervisor or superintendent. And he tells me, hey, stop telling people what you know. They think you're a know-it-all. I'm like, what? Yeah. This point and that one said that you act like a know-it-all. And they said that, and these were regular union employees. And I'm like, can I explain to him that? He goes, yeah, it doesn't work like that for civilian. And he wasn't a prior service guy. He was actually a turd. And he's like, yeah, that's not how they want it. And the one thing I learned, and it's helped me in my civilian career, is even if you know everything, act like you don't, and let somebody, when you're new in a position, let somebody act like they're teaching you something. And then when they walk away, go do what you need to do. And when you're doing it right and you're doing everything the way you're supposed to, they will absolutely tell everybody, like, that Daniel guy, I showed him how to do that. I taught him that. Even though they had nothing to do with it, they will be like, I showed that guy. And you can just sit back and be like, yep, absolutely did. And now you have an ally in your situation, whatever that is, and they think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. I learned it so quickly. I was like, this is ridiculous.
Gotta share this stuff. It sounds like there's a lot you learned in the military that kind of transferred to your professional life, and kind of a lot of lessons helped you excel.
Absolutely. But then I knew I wasn't going to, they wanted me to be in Willard, Ohio. And I had another friend who was a Marine who was very heavily involved in Toys for Tots, which is an amazing organization ran by the Marine Corps Reserves. And he said, Murph, you're not going to, he knew me well enough. He's like, you're not going to like it over there. He knew I wasn't going to like CSX. He's like, I'll get you in an Amtrak. Let me know when you're ready. So I called him up. His name's Vinny Roman. And Vinny and I have stayed close for years. We knew each other in the Marine Corps. So he got me in at Amtrak, and I worked at Amtrak for 7 years. Great job. Like, can't say anything bad. As long as you like to travel, I can't say anything bad about it. I met Damian Lewis. I had Tyra Banks on my train. I had Sarah Paulson on my train. What's her name from 10,000 Maniacs? I can't think of her name right now. The lead singer of 10,000 Maniacs. I've had her on my train. I've had Karen Gillan on my train. I had from Captain Janeway from Star Trek. She also played Red in Orange is the New Black.
Wow, she was like the Russian one, like the Soviet.
I've never watched Orange is the New Black. Somebody just told me.
This is like a shameful to admit on like a podcast, but for whatever reason, when I was in like 10th grade, I thought that was like a great show. Maybe that spoke to.
It might have been. It had great reviews, but the one that played Red, I had her on my train. The guy who played the butler from The Nanny with Fran Drescher. I've had John Carroll Lynch, and then the girl who played Ziva on NCIS. She's absolutely beautiful. She is as beautiful in person as she is on TV. Just absolutely beautiful. So I've had I met a lot of celebrities. What the heck's her name? She was on Big Love. She was in the movie Kids. I can't think of her name right now. The blonde. It's escaping me. But like I said, tons and tons of celebrities. Like, because the line that I was on was called the Hudson Line, in the Northeast Corridor. They all come up to Hudson, New York. Negan. I met Negan. But they all come up the Hudson Line, and they get off either Hudson, New York, or Rhinecliff, New York, because they have homes there or they're renting a home there. So tons and tons and tons of celebrities.
Interesting. That's awesome to hear.
Oh, Jennifer Lawrence. I had Jennifer Lawrence.
Oh, wow, that's good. How was when was Jennifer Lawrence? I feel like she came up only like 5-10 years ago. No, something like that.
No. So Jennifer Lawrence was probably, so it was pre-COVID. So it was probably 2018, 2019 when she was the highest paid actress in Hollywood. And that was an interesting one because, so we were on the platform almost sure we were in Penn Station. I know I was working 293 was the train number because it went to Vermont. And we're sitting there, and this never happened. The police never bring a passenger down to the train. So I'm standing outside of my door, and I have two partners, and all of a sudden here comes an Amtrak cop with this really tall guy, blonde hair, and this girl wearing a, what do they call them, pill bottle or pill hats that comes real low over their face, and they're
Yeah.
headed to the back. So instantly, I've got a device that tells me everybody on my train.
Yeah.
So I go right to business class, and I see these names, and I see Jennifer Lawrence. I'm like, what's the chances of this? Well, sure enough, it was her. She never came out of business class. The tall blonde hair guy was her boyfriend, who is a art dealer in New York City, who's originally from Vermont. And she is absolutely as beautiful in person as she is on TV. Like,
That's awesome. So probably it sounds like post Hunger Games. I forgot what she was filming around then, but I'm sure after Hunger Games, her kind of
her stock went so through the roof.
Yeah,
definitely. She's doing, what is it, the silver playbook, whatever the hell it was,
something like that. Yeah, she's been in a lot. Is Interstellar like the one space movie she was in with?
I didn't know she was in it.
Maybe not. Maybe I'm like butchering like the name of that movie, or I'm confusing Interstellar.
I know that there's a movie called Interstellar.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't her, but there was like another movie, some space movie she was in. Yeah. But nevertheless, she's got got stuff going for. Awesome that you were into her. Kind of on that note, are there any other crazy like Amtrak stories that you had that just like stick?
No, there's some that I won't share. I just can't.
That's fine.
I just can't.
That you're comfortable with.
But it was always, Amtrak was a funny place because the passengers didn't quite get it. Like if you went to an airport right now, you got to show up 2 hours prior. You got to take your shoes off. You've got to go through a metal detector.
It's the process.
There's a whole process to this. And beyond a shadow of a doubt that say the wrong thing at that gate, the police are going to show up, and there's a chance that you will go on a list that you're never allowed to get on a plane again. Amtrak is not that world. I would have people, as I'm sitting there going, Amtrak train 293, okay to go. Saying, hey, my train's time to go. Okay to go. And my train's pulling off, and people are running. I've had buddies, it never happened to me, where people try to, while the train's going, as they're picking up speed, jump and push past them to get on the train. Just absolute insanity. I had a guy one time standing at my door, and I'm like, you got a ticket? And this was in Poughkeepsie, New York, which we used to run into a lot of issues. It's a Metro North station. And he's like, I need to get on this train. I need to go to Albany. I'm like, let me see your ticket. I'm going to see a doctor. I was like, give me your ticket. And he kept at it. He's like, I'll punch you in the face. I'll punch you in your face. I was like, give it a shot, boss. You ain't getting on this train. And my partner was behind me at his door, like a car down. And he's like, oh my God. And he saw the guy reaching into his bag. And he thought the dude was reaching for a weapon. I was ready to just knock the dude out. And the guy was trying to grab all this paperwork. And I'm like, boss, you ain't got no ticket. You ain't riding on my train. We ran into that. Or people would be like, so if I didn't give you a ticket, what would happen? And I'm like,
you're not on the train.
And they would be on my train. They're like, if I don't give you my ticket, I'm going, so real simple. So that's called theft of services. So what would happen is I would ask you one more time to get a ticket if you don't have one. And if you're like, I'm not getting one. So at the next station, whatever police department is there, we're going to wait for them. And all these people are going to wait for you while those police show up to take you off my train. And all these other people, and I said it loud enough so everyone could hear me. So all these other people who have places to go are going to wait for you to get me a ticket so that you can keep going, or we'll wait for the police to come take you off. Bloop, here's my ticket. It was like magic because you say it loud enough. I don't have to do anything because I just wait for you to give me a ticket, and I've said it loud enough that you would see heads start popping up over the seat looking back like, who's this asshole? Who is this guy? I'm not going to do nothing. I don't have to do nothing. I've had that. I've had, let's see, I've had plenty of people I had to put off the train because they thought they were tough guys. And I just smiled at them. I'm like, I don't have to do anything. I'm not going to fight you. It's not worth my effort. Crazy stuff like that. On a positive though, I've had people, and that's the asshole side, but on the positive side, you get to know passengers, you get to know their lives. I met a lady, let me tell you the story. Her name, I won't say her name, but she was born in Cuba. And, we've all heard, at least I have from my generation, you've seen movies like Scarface. Oh, he's a Cuban immigrant, blah, blah, blah. Well, she really was. And she sat down with me one day on a trip and she was showing, we were talking. I was like, well, how'd you end up? She goes, my parents put in for a visa for us to come to the United States. And when we put this in, they accepted our visa, but the Cuban government came and she said they inventoried every single thing in their home. Pictures, forks, spoons, anything that you could imagine. They inventoried everything and then told them, I don't remember if I want to say she said it was one suitcase total, or it might have been one per person. Don't hold my feet to the fire. I can't remember. But they were allowed to have a bag. And what was in this bag had to be exactly what was inventory. Nothing more. You couldn't, on the way out the door, let me grab this picture and put it in there. Everything had to be the same. And she said, and then they told them, when we come and tell you that you're approved, you can take that one bag, everything else stays in the house, and you can leave. So can you imagine? I mean, you had to make sure that for a year, a picture didn't get lost, a spoon didn't get dropped somewhere. Everything was in order. And she said they showed up one day and they said, okay, you're approved. They took the bag, got in the car, and came to the United States. And her father was, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but he was like in that doctor, lawyer, accountant, higher level professions in Cuba, and came to the United States and was a cab driver. She, on the other hand, is currently an international lawyer. And I met people like that. I met people who on the train would tell me stories of their lives that I'm still friends with on Facebook that just, you're like, really? And cute stuff. Like my kids used to watch a show called Bubble Guppies. And I met the guy who put the music score together for Bubble Guppies. He was on my train. I'm a big comic book guy. And Greg Capullo, who is the artist for Batman, was on my train. He lives in another town close to me, but he was on my train, and Greg and I had met a couple times. But like, I get to have those kind of experiences on my train. I met Frank Miller, Superman Frank Miller. Funny enough story. God, what was the guy's name? I can't think of what the guy's name was, but it was this gentleman's name was similar to that of a comic book artist. And I was like, are you related to, just joking around? And he goes, no, but my wife up there is Frank Miller's sister. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, you can go say hi to her. And I went and talked to her, and she told me that because Frank's from Vermont, that his parents were super supportive of his idea of wanting to get into comic books, super supportive of his career as an artist and writer. And they supported him moving to New York City and getting involved. So I got to meet people like that. So like, if you're a social guy like me, the train is amazing. If you're not social, worst place to go in. And I loved it. It was a great environment. And I still have, close friends that, like I said, I left the railroad in June of 21. And I have friends that I still talk to. My friend Joanne and I were just texting yesterday because she's big into heavy metal and horror. And my wife and I in October are going to a Edgar Allan Poe themed speakeasy.
Oh, interesting. Maybe someone will read The Raven while you're there.
Oh, I love it. Nevermore.
Yeah, Nevermore. Sorry, I'm just remembering it's not an appropriate joke, but someone might be listening in 8th grade. Me and this one kid had this one joke, and there's like a curse word in Russian that we used to say that rhymed with nevermore. I'm not going to say it to try to keep things relatively clean, but
Now, are you Russian?
so my family's actually originally from Kiev, Ukraine. But
Oh, really?
when they were there, so this is why I'm trying to be like super politically correct regarding my background. But my family is originally from Kiev, and it's actually I'm happy you asked that question because something I wanted to bring up similar to your Cuba story. So essentially, back when my parents were still there, they actually ended up meeting in Israel. But that's I'll get into that in this whole
Interesting.
story. So I have a kind of ethnically ambiguous background, but basically, when they were in Kiev back then, it was all part of the Soviet Union. So think of like everything being under one rule. It was communism. I'm sure you're probably familiar with that from like the Cuba stories that you hear. And essentially, on a similar note, and I'll get into the rest of my background, but it was also a really scary situation. Like socialism, communism, like whatever you want to call it, sucks. Like you can work hard for whatever you have, but when stuff just gets taken away from you, it's not right. And there's a lot of crazy like immigration stories, especially in the so I live in like the outside Philadelphia area, and a lot of people there's like a lot of
Where?
immigrants that live here, and
Where?
what's up?
Where outside of Philadelphia?
Like Montgomery County ish area,
Where?
like Huntington Valley, Lower Moreland.
So, when I recruited for the Marine Corps, not to pause your story,
Sure.
my office was in Lansdale. My best friend still lives in Lansdale. I
Wow.
recruited out of North Penn High School, lived in Telford, and recruited in Allentown, Bethlehem, and ran the Reading office.
Oh, interesting. So you're familiar with the area,
I know it very well. My ex-wife is from Warminster, and her sister works at the Abington Hospital.
right around the corner. Okay, awesome, interesting. So you're familiar with the whole like outside Philly. Everyone's outside Philly, but there's a
Absolutely. That's why when you were like outside Philly, I'm like, tell me more. Let me hear this.
yeah. That's quick. I'll get back to the immigrant story in a second, but I happen to go to Penn State, and Penn State has a lot of kids from my area end up going to Penn State, and everyone says they're outside Philly, but then outside Philly is like a 30-mile radius, like actually outside Philly. So no, that's really
Trenton,
interesting.
New Jersey.
Yeah, Trenton. I mean, Trenton is technically outside Philly, even though it seems like its own little thing. Do you ever pass the bridge that says that Trenton makes the world takes?
Yes.
I'm still confused by that bridge to this day. I mean, maybe they make something, but like I haven't seen it.
It used to be a very industrial city.
It used to be, yeah. I mean, I take the train station there is nice. I used to live in New York, so it was easy to commute. But yeah,
All right. So I
Trenton.
didn't mean to pause you. So your parents are in Ukraine. They're
Or,
meeting.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I have a ton to say about Trenton, but I think the immigration story is much much more interesting. But basically, um, so like back then, everything was under kind of Soviet rule, and then they were able to escape. There was like this organization, kind of I don't know the exact story, so if I'm wrong and my mom's listening to this, I'm sorry. But basically, there's like this organization that helped people, like this undercover organization that helped people, especially Jews, kind of escape to Israel or kind of just leave the country, just so they wouldn't have to deal with persecution, especially with like a lot of anti-Semitism and just general communism that was going on then. So what happened was they left, like as the Soviet Union was kind of collapsing. Thankfully, they were able to get out. They actually met in Israel, and my siblings were actually born in Israel. So I speak a little bit of Hebrew, but moved to the States in like 2002. And that's the extent to kind of my immigration story. I've been in America since 2002, like loosely outside the Philadelphia area. But on that note, it's kind of like it's insane how there's a lot of stories similar to what you said earlier about the woman from Cuba, how people had very high positions, and then they had to leave because of circumstances, and then it's unfair, but that's how life is. They get to a new country, they don't speak the language, they'll take what they can get, but then a lot of times you see those kids kind of continuing their legacy and then becoming like hotshots or advanced folks. So I think not to generalize, but a lot of the folks that came over just kind of they're not in. I don't want to call people entitled, like or like say anything against them, but they come with a sense of like hunger and urge. Like they're used to much more difficult circumstances, so the challenges that come at them are much comparatively easier than just like, oh, I was bullied today at school, or like Sally said something mean to me. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And you nailed it. I think a lot of, and we got a little echo again. I think a lot of people here in the States were used to a comfortable life, and we're used to comfortable situations. Nobody wants to hurt anybody's feelings anymore. Nobody wants to make anybody mad anymore. When as your parents are coming from a situation where, I mean, if you really think about it, they came from the Ukraine, where if you did your research, people understand that there's still a huge anti-Semitic attitude in
Definitely.
that region. It's massive.
Mhm.
Then you turn around and you're in Israel, where now there's huge fighting. Still, even like I remember that stuff from back when I was a kid.
Mhm.
Like, folks, if you don't know what we're talking about, go look up the 3 Day War. It'll blow your mind. Uh, and it also asks a lot of questions. But then you have that, and then to come here where it's like you feel they're probably still tense,
Mhm.
like they're ready to go. And around here we're like, hey, how's everybody doing? Beautiful, and
Different.
we're in Philly, but it's a whole nother shitty situation.
Definitely, definitely can resonate with what you're saying. Crazy. I mean, look, a lot of crazy immigration stories that I've heard, like people just like working with someone undercover to like sneak some kind of art piece away, so like the government doesn't take it. But no, definitely a crazy vibe.
That's
Hopefully,
awesome.
yeah. The one other thing I wanted to say though, like before kind of move forward with your journey, what's interesting about Kiev, I know right now that unfortunately there's like a big conflict going on there, so hope stuff calms down there. But there's a lot of really holy rabbis. I don't know the exact names of them, but like there's a lot of really holy rabbis or really holy Jewish figures that are actually buried in Ukraine. Interestingly, so it's like a very
Hmm.
holy. It's known as like there's a lot of Jewish history there, but also a lot of anti-Semitism. So like an interesting little contradiction that they have there.
Yeah, I mean, you're dealing with the original, Nazi party coming into those regions, Austria, and setting like, hey, you guys really belong over here, don't you know that?
Mhm.
So you have that still as part of an environmental piece, and then you turn around and you have the Eastern Bloc Jewish population that really was where it spread out from. Israel. There was a huge Eastern Bloc Jewish population. Yeah, absolutely. Your parents are badasses. I just
Yeah,
want you to know that
I'll
from someone
definitely.
who's never met your parents are badasses.
I'll tell you. So, not to get too into it, but unfortunately, my father passed when I was younger. My mother's still with us, but I'll make sure to tell her after the show that she's a
Well, you can
badass.
tell her I said she's a badass. Your dad, he might have passed. He was still a badass because he got you here.
Yeah.
So he carried the. You know what? He carried the weight. He did the work. He got you as far as he could,
Hmm.
and then he knew he had succeeded in getting his family and his children to safety. That dude's a badass.
Definitely, for
Every
sure.
bit, 100%
Appreciate that. My mom
badass.
is gonna love hearing that, but it's great to hear. Appreciate the compliments there,
You're
but
welcome, brother.
to keep going, man. I know so far you're in the Marines, then you got this crazy train life. Then naturally, as a people person, you transition to recruiting. Like,
Yeah,
is there a reason you left the not to confuse it with the thug life, but the train life to the recruiting life?
I get a big Amtrak tattoo across my stomach. But well, I left the railroad because so fast, roll back to 2001. COVID's in full swing. The world's coming to an end. We're all going to fall apart. We're going to have to wear biosuits to just shake hands. All this stuff is going on. But really, what kind of happened there for me was I had almost 7 years seniority, and I still got furloughed. It was only for 15 minutes, and it was I knew it was coming because I knew it was happening, but I had somebody senior to me that was leaving. But it was a real eye opener that I had 40 people junior to me, and I could still get furloughed. And Albany, New York, Amtrak, up until that point, there's guys that would tell you, we've never been furloughed. We always made it through. So that was a real eye opener. And I'm watching trains that, I used to run from Albany to Penn Station in the mornings. And I'm watching trains that you could, in the morning, anywhere between 180 to 250 people commuting to New York City. And now we're running trains with 3. Everybody had their own private car, basically. And things are really looking bad. And you got to keep in mind, in 2019, Amtrak had its greatest year ever economically, like just making money. New York is talking about, they're in the process of it. They're in 2020, before COVID, we're bringing back cafe service on every train from Albany to New York City. We're going to put in the process. Oh, excuse me. So we have a commissary. Like, things are going good. And then it stops. COVID stops it. And here I am, and I'm watching this. So I started doing my research. That was actually when I first started looked at franchises and everything. And I kind of put my feelers out. And another Marine that worked with me on recruiting duty sends me a message. He goes, Murph, are you looking for another job? I said, well, I'm doing my research. I'm looking into things. I got to see what's going on out there. So he puts me in contact with his boss. And this is the largest staffing firm in what they call the North Country of New York. And in New York, anything up by the Canadian border, Montreal, Lake George, that's the North Country. It's the land that God forgot. It's the frozen tundra. It's everything you can think of. And this, back to the military for a minute, this was a big Air Force town, Plattsburgh, New York, that got caught up in the BRAC, which is the Base Relocation and Closure Act, another gift from the Clintons to the world, where they closed all these bases because they said, well, we don't need these, and killed a lot of towns. Thank you, Clintons. You can come find me.
It's all good,
But
man. Say what you got to say.
I don't, I'm not worried about them. But, it's another one of those towns.
Mm-hmm.
But they were able to survive it.
Mm-hmm.
And the staffing firm's up there. So my buddy says, hey, talk to my boss. Went through the process with him. And I decided, they were like, look, we want to start a location in Albany. We tried it once in 2019 and it failed. We couldn't get it off the ground. We need somebody who really knows the area to help us. And because of my recruiting background and because of what I did, I kind of had a better understanding of it. So June of 2021, I walk away from recruiting duty. I'm like, all right, I'm done. Or walk away from the railroad, which was a tough situation. You got to keep in mind, I've got buddies that are still over there and it's public knowledge. But those guys, conductors with all their seniority, are making $45 an hour. So I walked away from $45 an hour, and I knew that was coming. So, okay, here I am. I'm gonna go do this. Oh, and by the way, I'm gonna go do this for a company that hasn't even established a position in this town. They don't know anything, and every time, I've got to tell them all this. So I really spent a lot of time, but it goes back to that Marine Corps side for me, where I don't know how to fail at it. I don't know where to fail at it.
You gotta get it done. It's a process.
What do you got a dinosaur? Okay. But so I had to kind of figure this whole piece out. So for that particular company, and it's a good company, good people, they in the first 6 months, I got our foot in the door. I got us established. We did very well for a company that no one knew. When you figure they're doing double-digit millions of dollars up north, where everybody, you couldn't swing a dead cat and not hit somebody they employed. Down here, no one knows who you are. So I'm fighting through. And then by the second year, I set them up and we had everything set up and established. Made a lot of money in the area. But the problem I ran into, and don't hold this against me, Daniel. 47 years old now. I was 46 at the time. The woman who owned the company, she's a sweetheart, love her to death. She's great. But the way you do, it's kind of this idea. The way I would do business in Albany, New York is not how I would do business in Plattsburgh, no different than how I would do business in New York City or Philly. There's a way each city does business. And Albany is a very interesting city because Albany is still newspaper, television media. They have a thing called the Albany Business Review, which is a book that if your name's not in there, you ain't nobody. They'd still do dinners and gatherings at Saratoga National Golf Course, which is absolutely gorgeous. And everybody mingles at these things. And that's how they get things done around here. I'll tell that to when I met him, he was 29. When I left, he was 32-year-old who thinks that advertising is Google, Facebook. Hey, look, Albany doesn't do business that way. Albany is still over here. No, we don't do that. We don't do any legacy advertising. So I made somebody a lot of money, and he's still good. Like I don't hold anything against him, but I couldn't no longer, with my experience, do this. And I mean, I'm talking, I built relationships that even when I walked away from things, people would call me and go, "Hey, how do I deal with this guy?"
Good.
Let me call him for you, because I
Got
could,
it. No,
because I'm a big relationship guy. I think that to me is more valuable
for
than
sure.
anything else. Um, so we put those pieces together, and I did that for 3 years. It was great. Like, it's an experience and the knowledge base that I would never be able to be where I am today
Hmm.
if I didn't do what I did for those 3 years. Because there was business related things like margins that I didn't understand. Um,
So you wouldn't.
Cost, right? Like, because I had to deal with margins, I had to deal with taxes, I had to deal with employee related things that I had never done before, bidding processes. Excuse me. Those were things that I had never done before in my other careers. This 3 years was a trial by fire. And it really showed me, I've always believed in a theory of, I know what I don't know and I know who to hire. So I don't want to know I don't know what you do, Daniel. I mean, you could be an underwater basket weaver for all I know. I don't want to be an underwater basket weaver. I want to know what you do.
Got
I
it.
want to know what your process is, but I don't want to know what you do, because if I know what you do, then why the hell am I hiring?
Yep, for sure. I mean, I could be an undercover spy, but assuming I'm not, in another
No.
lifetime, not to get in the weeds. I feel like I've said this on a bunch of podcasts. So sorry if people are getting sick of it, but I actually wanted to work in investment banking, but I picked the worst time to try to transition because interest rates went up, everyone got laid off. Yeah, there was a lot of shenanigans that were going on with that. But that being said, I actually did work with a lot of recruiters and had a lot of conversations with them. And recruiting sounds like it's a really fun job, but it's probably stressful as hell. Like, because you're just dealing with so many different parties. It takes like one small pin or like one small crack, and like someone's not getting hired. It's
It's it's a it's a feast or famine. Everybody who's on recruiting is an absolute adrenaline junkie of some sort. They're looking for that hit every time. Um, I'll give you a
it's
great,
too.
yeah. But when you get it, that dopamine hit from, oh, it's like you're scratching your neck. You're like, I
Yeah,
got it. Like like you look like a junkie, because you know it's it's things like, putting somebody into a job, and you think, well, they're in the job. Well, the way the contract's written, if they leave before 90 days or get fired in 90 days, you don't
okay.
get paid. So now, even though I got you the job, I got you through the interview process, I got you through onboarding, I got to fuck with you for 90 days to make sure you keep your head on straight. And I can't tell you how many times you think you got somebody in somewhere, and 3 weeks into the job, they're like, I don't know if I like this, man. I think I'm going to go back to my old job. They asked me to come back for more money. Or somebody says to you, and you've worked it out. You're like, hey, what kind of money do you need to take this job? If they offered me 95,000, I'm taking this job. So 95,000. What about, other things? How many vacation days do you need? How many holidays? Like, if they 2 weeks paid vacation, 95,000, I'm taking this. Have you spoke to your other employer
It's
and made them aware that, like, hey, you're looking for a raise to 95,000? Yeah, man, they ain't going to give it to me. That's not what I said. Did you talk to them? Yeah, I talked to them. And I used to have this whole thing about counter offers. Counter offers never work. I'll tell anybody in your audience. Counter offers don't work. Nobody leaves a job for money. It's a fact. We do not leave jobs for money. We leave jobs because of bosses and cultures. If you look at anybody, you probably know somebody right now that is getting paid less than what they're worth, and you're smiling because you already have somebody in mind. They
definitely.
work somebody. What's that?
I said definitely. I can't say obviously, but for sure.
But they work somewhere for less money than what they're worth, but they like their boss or they like their environment.
Mhm.
They're willing to take that. So people are willing to take pay cuts for that purpose. And people, for the same reason, leave jobs because of bosses and cultures. They do not leave jobs for money, because really, if I'm making 60,000 right now and you're going to pay me 70, but I can pay all my bills and I like where I work at, why would I leave? Why would I even choose that? So I would go through these full blown, Daniel, conversations at nauseum with people just to turn around and them go, yeah, so I told my current employer and they offered me 95 also, so I'm going to just stay here. Bro, I asked you this question. We had this conversation. Yeah, but, and then I would go back through, like, you do understand that now that you've accepted this offer, every time you have a bad day, you're going to wish you left your job. Every time you have a bad day, your employer is going to think that this is your last day. You weren't staying to start with for the money. So now you've created this. Oh, and by the way, they never planned on paying you that much more over your salary. So you just became a financial burden to your employer who wasn't planning on that. So now they need to find a way to get rid of you or get rid of somebody else because they cannot afford to keep you on at that amount. And they would look at me and be like, what? I'm like, we had this conversation. We spoke about this. How hard is this for you to understand? So I like, that was the other side to recruiting. It was great when you got somebody a job and they're like, thank you. I'm so much happier now. I've never been happier in my life. But, and then the other side with business development is you're constantly out there looking for new companies. You're constantly out there talking to people. You're hustling. And then you have to listen to these turd bag that have no idea what you do for all day long going, hey, well, I don't know what we're going to do. We don't have enough companies. Bro, do you know what I do? Oh, you ain't doing enough. Really? I ain't doing enough. Let me take a look at what you did today. And I couldn't deal with it anymore. And again, like I said, at 47 years old and the experiences I've had through the Marine Corps and dealing with people in sales, like, dude, if you saw that, Daniel, the sales training that I've done, I was trained the trainer qualified. Do you know what that is?
Like, you train the people who train people.
Exactly. So I'm trained the trainer qualified. I understand all those elements. I understand how to put it all together. I understand all the process. What I didn't have, and I thank this company every day for it, is I didn't have the business accoutrement for what that part of it took. And I learned a ton that way. And that was the hardest transition to where I'm at right now, is transitioning from an employee mindset to a boss's mindset. But I couldn't leave that world fast enough. I learned a ton, but that particular one, and even that one, I had a friend who's got another podcast. It's a recruiting podcast. And him and I were talking one day. I was like, his name's Marcus. I'm like, Marcus, this thing's driving me nuts. He's out in Silicon Valley. He's like, well, tell me what's going on. And I told him everything I do. He goes, Shawn, I can get you $5 million in funding and you just start your own company. He goes, no,
it's just a Fun Valley answer.
He goes, I'll get you $5 million in funding and you start your own company. He goes, nobody does what you're doing. Because I was finding the employer, signing the contract, finding the candidate, getting them into the job, following up with them, following up with the employer. I was doing he goes, no one does that. He goes, you're doing the job of 3 to 5 other people. Like, this is how this works everywhere else. You're doing everything. I'm like, bro, I'm fucking dying right now.
Dude, that's such a California or like Silicon Valley answer. Like, you have an issue, like, let me just throw like $5-10 million at it. Like,
but when he said that, he's like, Shawn, I get you $5 million in funding and you just start your own thing. I'm like, really? I'm like, I don't know. But but that's where I am today. So today, kind of transitioning from that world to this, is I started the funding long beforehand and had to start my research. But in April, I made the purchase and went to training. And I started on May 1. I own now 2 territories within a Budget Blinds franchise, the North America's largest window treatment company.
Got it.
And really was my first time learning what it means to not be an employee. And it took a lot to learn how to not be an employee. Oh, we might have lost Daniel. Did we lose him? Daniel, did I lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm
I thought you.
I can edit that. Don't worry, we're good. Just you can keep going.
Okay, well, you ain't got to edit it out. It's the real deal.
Real
Don't
deal.
edit
Fine.
shit out.
Awesome. Fine. As we've heard, if you're hearing this, that's what happens. And
This is look. If you ever thought about starting a podcast, listen to me. You got 10 episodes. After 10 episodes, you really actually give a shit because the first 10 are the toughest,
for sure.
and then you realize that you have to do it all the time. And those of us that podcast and we're up into, I'm pushing almost 200 episodes on my show, the Above the Bar podcast. And it's every Wednesday. It's got to be clockwork. You got to set a process. But that actually has been part of, owning my franchise, has been this whole mindset that I had to learn so much about not being an employee and working to be a boss and having other employees that work for me. And I look out with who I've got. My eldest son is my installer. He puts everything together for me. I'm able to work with him, and he sees this as, hey, I can learn from dad how to run a company, how to run a business so that I can make the pitfalls for him and he can go run it. My wife is a huge supporter of mine. When I have things going on, I can lean on her and ask questions, and she looks at it from a completely different angle than I do. And I have to, and she can be like, well, why aren't we doing this? Or how do we approach that? And I've even learned with a lot of things, it's easier for me to give it to her and let her run with it. Like when I complain, my complaints are more like, you need to fix this or I'm going to find you. And it's going to be an unpleasant conversation. My wife is like, so because of you doing this, this is what you've caused. 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 Now I need to know how you're going to go ahead and compensate us for all these situations that you've caused so that we can get back on track because you're affecting the way I do business. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, yeah, we're going to do this, and this for you. Me, I'm like straight Liam Neeson. Like, I have a very particular set of skills. I'm going to find you. Like, that's me. My wife is like so different. She's like in their cerebral, like boom, 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 boom. So
just get this stuff done. No, for sure. It's definitely. But just out of the blue note, do you ever think about doing comedy or just like being an actor? Like you have a great Liam Neeson, great Philly impression. Like I'm really impressed by a lot of these accents.
Well, it's not a Philly impression, bro. I'm from Baltimore. You guys have the same accent.
Yeah, we do. No, that's a fair point.
This is not me faking it. This is look, I love tasty cakes. I like sweet tea. I go to Wawa. Sheets is bullshit.
There we go.
Like this is real, man. Like I lived that world.
Got it. Are you right now, Holly, you're like based up in Michigan, right?
No, I'm in Albany, New York.
Oh, Albany, New York. My bad. Sorry, I was looking just on a different location. So you guys in Albany, you guys have Wawas, right? I'm assuming?
No.
Oh.
They have these bullshit convenience stores called Stewart's.
Oh.
And everybody's like, oh, Stewart's ice cream is just so amazing. We love it up here.
1 second. That's a great impression. Like of the average like person like just living in rural America. Like, oh God. Sorry, I had to say that.
Oh, it drives me absolutely nuts. The only thing I will give Stewart's though is because the pizza in Albany, New York sucks. Stewart's pizza is pretty good, and they do a pretty good buffalo chicken ranch pizza. But it's like the Albany thing is tiny hot dogs. These little tiny hot dogs that they put on a bun with like a meat sauce, and it's really just a matter of time. My wife is walking past. What are you stealing? I'm MacGyvering. What are you My wife is MacGyvering something.
It's all good. Hey, it's authenticity. That's what we're about.
I'm looking at her as she's like got something folded up in her shirt as she's leaving where all my tools are at. And I'm trying to figure out what she went and stole from my tool bin. Probably my batteries out of my van. You did steal my batteries out of my van, didn't you? She did. She stole the batteries out of my van.
What can you do?
It's ridiculous. But no, it really is one of those like I love the Mid-Atlantic. I'm such a Mid-Atlantic guy. Like everybody else is like, New Yorkers, and then you got the, I'm from the South. Bro, I'm all about the Mid-Atlantic. Maryland, Delaware, and PA. Like that's where it's at. The rest of it's all bullshit. It really is. Look, we got amazing food. Amazing cheesesteaks. I used to tell people all the time, they'd be like, oh, well, what's the best cheesesteak in Philly? What neighborhood do you live in? That's the best. Like whatever neighborhood you live in, that's the best one because that's the one you grew up on, and they make it the way you like it. For me, I used to love when I lived in Lansdale, Ray's in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. I don't even know if it's still around.
Might
You used
be.
to have you used to have to eat the top of it with a fork before you could ever eat the cheesesteak. Like exactly.
We
Like
love that.
that's what I need. I need that before the rest of the bullshit.
Yeah.
Um, Ray's or New Station Pizza was another one up in that area that I used to love theirs. But we also have seafood. You got Maryland seafood, which is absolutely amazing. If it was time for school supplies or you needed to buy appliances, you went to Delaware because it was tax free. Everybody, oh, we need a new refrigerator. Well, let's go down to Delaware and we'll go buy one in Delaware because it's tax free. Like you're laughing because it's true. At some point in time, mom was like, "Yeah, we gotta go down to Delaware. Gotta go get a new fridge or something." You knew somebody.
When I bought, when we got the first time we got an iPad, I think we noticed there was like $70 or $80 in tax on it, and then we were like, "Oh, we should have just done this in Delaware. Like that would have saved us like a dinner or two."
Right. It's absolutely the fact when you live in the mid, but we have things in the Mid Atlantic that you can't get nowhere else. Like I think Rita's ice sucks. I don't like Rita's. I'm not a Rita's guy. I have a buddy of mine. He lives in New Orleans who used to live in Philly. He loves Rita's. He's like, bro, I miss Rita's. But I'm a Baltimore snowball guy. I'm a pork sandwich in Philadelphia kind of guy. Like, you can go get your cheesesteak. I love a good cheesesteak. But have you ever had a pork sandwich? Have you ever had a whole roasted pork from South Philly when the Italians get the whole pork and they do the whole thing? So people don't realize you can get a whole pig roasted in South Philly.
So I'll preface this. So I'm not too religious, but semi-kosher. So I haven't had pork, but I have heard that it's really good. So maybe I can imagine that it's. All right,
we'll pretend.
We'll pretend, yeah.
We'll pretend, but I mean, it's it's just Philly, Delaware, Maryland, and Delaware's kind of like the kid that none of us want to like have. Like he's the one kid that's like, hey, can I play with the other kids? And everybody's like, who's bringing Delaware along? Because it's really Maryland and PA. It's Maryland and PA, and then we just got to deal with Delaware kind of being like, it'd be cool. But sure. I miss it. I love that area. And Wawa, I love Wawa.
Wawa's great, dude. There's like 5 within like a mile radius. It's definitely the plush late night snack. But
what's your go-to Wawa sub?
So the Wawa subs. This is like the non-kosher answer. So sorry if any rabbis are listening to this, but my go-to is a whole wheat 10-inch. Or whole wheat classic, my bad. That's the religious way, not the religious, but like the Wawa, a lingual way to say it. With buffalo with like breaded chicken, buffalo sauce, extra buffalo. I always got to mention the extra buffalo. Then provolone cheese, lettuce, tomato, a little bit of onion, pepper, oregano, parmesan. It's like comes in clutch.
What's not kosher there? Is it just because it's not like absolutely kosher, like blessed kosher?
No. So there's like not to get on the whole tangent, but you can't mix milk and meat. So that's like one of the rules that I don't keep. But that's like a kosher rule that I'm not as strict about. But if we're being like black and white about it, that's one of the rules.
Okay, all right. So for me, it is Wawa tuna salad with bacon, provolone, banana peppers, and the buffalo sauce toasted.
Wow. Interesting.
It's got to be toasted.
Has to be toasted.
And then for a side, I need some Wawa mac and cheese and a couple of packs of Texas Pete.
Texas Pete. I have a friend that put me on Texas Pete. I have this bagel. So a few shameless plugs. I have this bagel that I make. It's like I send a picture to my friends every weekend. It's like an everything bagel. Well, sometimes just like full wheat everything, whatever, with egg. And like I put a lot of butter in when I like make it with the eggs, just so it's like really, really like a really dense flavor. But like egg, cheese, and then 2 hash browns. And then I put like a little bit of everything seasoning and like a lot of Texas pizza on it. Like that's just like that's my happiness. Like
so you're not fully kosher.
Not fully.
Like you're still touching paper on Fridays,
Yes, I mean I go to services sometimes, but I don't like I'm not like, look, my perspective on it, and like I could go into a whole tangent, is like, I have my vibe, like the way I connect to my religion, but like, everyone else, even the people that aren't Jewish, like, even people that aren't religious or like don't see themselves as religion. I think the biggest thing is like you got to respect everyone else's vibe. Everyone else has like different experiences. Like the worst thing you can do is like be a dick to someone. You know, I think like I have my view, someone else got has their view. Like that's cool. I like we can jive together. Like no big deal. You know.
Taylor ham? Yes, no. I mean, never had it, have you?
No, I've not. Ham, I've not. Pork, any like pig. Pig, I have not
Oh
had.
man, like that's another thing I got turned on when I was in Philly was the Taylor ham, uh, Taylor ham with a runny egg and a sandwich. Like, dude,
Oh,
that's it's absolute glory. And I was like, yeah, and I can get that up here in Albany. I can get the Taylor, but there's only one grocery store. But you know what I can't get here is Lebanon bologna,
oh,
and I love Lebanon bologna. See, that's like one of those things. It's like PA. I'll give a lot of credit to. Like, it's it's a very unique state because you can hit Amish country and get Pennsylvania Dutch peanut butter pie, which is not peanut butter pie like everywhere else, where they're like, "Oh, I went to what's the one that has the crazy menu, Cheesecake Factory,
cheesecake,
like
yeah.
like the menu that reads like a novel." And they're like, "Oh, we have peanut butter pie," and I'm like, I taste it, I'm like, "That's not peanut butter. Like you need Dutch peanut butter pie. That's a whole nother animal, or shoe fly pie. You know, those are whole nother animals." But PA's got that. Like you can get that, or like Philly's got its own vibe. I have friends from out towards Pittsburgh. Totally different cuisine, totally different way to eat, totally different vibe. But in all of them, if you tell somebody you want a lager, they know you want a Yingling. That's how I always tell people. You can tell if somebody's from PA or not, or lived there for a long time. Do they call it PA, and do they ask for a lager, or do they go, "Can I get a Yingling?" Like if they ask for a Yingling, they're not from PA.
Got it for sure. The last thing I'll say on that, and shameless plug, so definitely not sponsored anyway. But if you guys want to, if like the restaurant I'm about to say wants to sponsor me, definitely, you guys know where to find me. But the best pizza I've had in my life is a place in, I believe in Fishtown in northern, like on the border between Fishtown and Northern Liberties. If that sounds familiar at all, it's a place called Pizza Shack and Maxon. Like I lived, I think I mentioned earlier, I lived in New York 2 years. This is still like the best pizza I've ever had in my life is from,
Really?
yeah, it's like
I
this
know Fishtown.
it's like this one little corner shop on like the, I think the intersection of like on Shack and Maxon and Broad or Gerard. I think Shack and Maxon and Gerard as the intersection. And it's like this one small place, like unassuming. There's only outdoor seating, but like this is the best pizza I've ever had in my life. So if anyone's listening, if you're ever in Philly, man, like that's, if you're ever in the area, let me know and we can get some shacks. Like that's what I call it.
I'm down. I'm down with the get down. I am
Dude,
down with
they're
the get down. I
the
love.
best pizza I've had. But no, that's that
There's a
place.
little chubby kid that lives in my soul,
Mhm.
and he just wants to eat. He just wants to eat.
That when you're next time you're in Philly, Pizza Shack and Max, and you'll never forget it. It's the best.
Absolutely, I'm down with it. Yeah, and that's that goes back to my whole entire career,
Mhm.
whether it be my time in the Marine Corps, when I grew up with Baltimore food, and I remember the first kid that I met that was from Texas, but his family immigrated from Mexico, and we're sitting at a Mexican restaurant, and I'm getting ready to order typical bullshit like burrito, taco, and he's like, "Why don't you have a chilies rellenos?" And I'm like, "Because I don't know what that is. What the hell is that?" And he turned me on to chilies rellenos. I grow poblanos in my garden because of that. I was 18 years old. I grow my own poblanos, and I make my own dish. I love chilies rellenos to the point that my wife will tell you when we go to a Mexican restaurant, that's how I judge if they're good or not. If your chilies rellenos sucks, your food sucks in general. And I've never been wrong. But I learned that in my journeys with like food throughout the entire country and where we're from and where we see things. I used to teach my Marines, where do people eat in this town? And they'd be like, "I don't know, Gunny. I go and find people and recruit." I'm like, okay, let's go find where they eat at. Because if you know where people eat at, that's where they gather at. That's where you can find out what's going on in a town. That's where you can find out the real stories about a town. Um, I love mac and cheese. You're a mac and cheese guy?
Buffalo mac and cheese too. I just
Now, in Pennsylvania, you may or may not have heard of this town. You ever heard of Shamokin, Pennsylvania?
said Shabokin.
Shamokin with an M.
Shamokin.
So
Never. No.
Shamokin's in the coal cracker country, north of Reading, up in that area where it's really kind of the land that God forgot up there. He put it there and said, I'll get back to this, and then forgot that he put it there. Just never got back to it. To this day, the best mac and cheese I've ever had was up there. And it was only served on Fridays. There's a high school up there, and there's a little restaurant, and the restaurant was owned by a former like police chief whose daughter worked at the high school and son-in-law was a cop. He owned this restaurant, and on Fridays you could get a Delmonico steak and mac and cheese for $19.99.
Oh,
And the mac and cheese was done, my favorite way was stewed tomatoes. If you've never had mac and cheese with stewed tomatoes, if you can pull that dish off, that really super creamy mac and cheese with the breadcrumbs and these stewed tomatoes of just warm spaghetti sauce kind of flavor to them inside of it, bro, it's amazing. If you could pull that off, and this lady would make it at her house and bring it to the restaurant only on Fridays. I would have never experienced that without the Marine Corps. I'm not going. You live in PA. You don't know where Shamokin is.
there's a bunch of small towns. Like there's like a Springfield in every state. I've never been to Springfield. Like I'm sure they probably also have, like some random thing. It's all like this, but you know what? They do a good job of maybe keeping it quiet, so like they don't get New Yorkified. If you know what I'm saying.
Oh, I know what you mean. But yeah, it's my the things I've done in life, and now kind of moving around, and now being with what I do today, I drive all over parts of New York that were an hour away from me, 45 minutes away from me, that I never knew existed. And I get to meet people and help turn their houses into homes with new window treatments and experience with that, and work through that process, and decorating their homes with new window coverings and how it's going to look for years to come, and become part of their lives. And it's an amazing thing. And like I said, my son's my installer, so I go in and I help you work out how it's going to look, and then he comes in behind me and he actually hangs the window treatments up and he puts the things into your home. There's no cooler experience than that.
That's awesome to hear. Really, it's like an incredible thing. I'm sure you love traveling and meeting people. And actually, speaking of someone you met, it's a good transition. One of the out of the blue things I wanted to ask. So on your Instagram, so I know you actually got a chance to meet Mark Henry. Like, how did that happen? I mean, this guy's like, big WWE guy. When I was younger,
fan in the world.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. It's his nickname. Back in the day, maybe watched when I was like 10, 11, watched too much fake wrestling when I was younger. But I know he was a big character there. So how did that happen? Like, what was that interaction like?
Mark Henry, strongest man in the world, sexual chocolate. Mark Henry. So I'm involved podcasting wise with the Above the Bar podcast with the International Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. It's located here in Albany, inside of what's now called the MVP Arena. It used to be the Times Union Center, the Pepsi Arena, and before that, the Knickerbocker. And it's up here in Albany. So I'm involved with that with a friend of mine, Mike, who is the vice president, and Seth, who is the president of the organization. Dude, if you love classic wrestling, just some really cool memorabilia they have inside of this place. And I podcasted from it every year. This was its third year. So this year, as we were doing the awards, one of the gentlemen that was getting an award is a podcaster that actually podcasts with Mark Henry and Mark Henry's son, who was in another one of those pictures. And everybody's like, Mark's not going to make it. He's not going to make it for everything. And it was like, man, it happens. The guy's a busy man. Well, he showed up. And the coolest part is my 6-year-old is a huge Mark Henry fan. Like, that's his character he likes to play, because he loves him when Mark Henry walks out. Strongest man in the world, Mark Henry. So he always plays it. So that's how I got to meet him. And that was a cool event. Let's see who else was there. So if you like the Mark Henry era, do you remember the Nasty Boys?
Not really. So, I mean, I watched when I was like 10, 11, I think I used to watch WWE. I didn't really watch it past that. Like, I remember there was like Undertaker and like, who else was there? There was like Kane. Oh, this is like bringing back some movies and like Big Show, all these guys.
Yeah, so there was a lot of good dudes there. Dan Severn was there. The Nasty Boys were there. And they just, they were doing some awards. Probably one of the coolest awards out. I can't think of the gentleman's name. He was from like the late early 1900s.
Mhm.
And they actually attribute modern martial arts like judo and jujitsu with the way they do arm locks and choke holds and stuff like that to an American who went to Japan in like the 19 teens and was doing the earliest adaptions of MMA. And he would go and wrestle with these judo masters and jujitsu and would arm lock them and choke the shit out of them. And these guys weren't used to move. They were used to throws. Like they're very, like those traditional moves are throws. And here's this dude showing up with American wrestling moves and just arm locking a guy before he could throw him and taking him down with a wrestling like Greco-Roman style, or getting behind somebody and just choking the snot out of them. Today we think that like that's all them. No, that comes from an American pro wrestler who brought that stuff to Japan and trained with those guys. That's how that ended up there. It wasn't them. They didn't start it. It was an American that started it.
It's incredible. I mean, interesting stuff going on in the wrestling and the fighting game, and a lot of cool cultures. But always fascinating to hear that it was an American that kind of learned it, went here and like fought all these judo masters, and was like, "No, that's fighting innovation. That's how it is." So definitely interesting to see what happens there. But another thing that you mentioned, happy, you mentioned it because I wanted to get into it. But you also run a podcast, Above the Bar, and I'll happily include a link to that in the description. Can you speak to a little bit about your podcast and kind of what you talk about on there?
Absolutely. So I've been podcasting since June of 2020
Mm.
and full time. So I had a friend, we call him the Podfather. He had a show called FBI, Fanboys Inc., and it was all comic books and comic book related. I'm a big comic book fan. I'll be in New York City for New York City Comic Con. I go every year with my best friend. And I was really, I enjoyed it. But my wife used to always say, we should podcast. Yeah, I'll get the stuff. I'll get involved in it. And I just kept kicking the can down the road till June of 2020. My wife's like, here's your equipment. Better get to work. And I'm like, oh, shit, this is real. So I started it, and I don't know if I would say, my process has evolved. I definitely have more of a process now. I'm booked out till February on my show. I contact my guest, my process is very like next month's guest for October will get contacted a week prior to October. All the guests for that month will get contacted. Are you still good for October? I need you to send me your headshots, social media link, or your media kit so that I can get you ready a week prior to the show. We advertise it out so everyone knows. Show starts Tuesday. I did it just before this show.
Awesome.
Tuesday, I send you a message. Hey, be aware by 5:30 you'll have your links. Show starts at 8. You need to log in by 7:50 p.m. Show will start promptly at 8, even if you're not logged in. I will start promptly at 8 o'clock. I do not move my time. I do not shift my time. This is when my show starts. It is live. People can ask you questions. People can interact with you. They can see you the entire time. That's when you were like, hey, I'm going to edit this out. I don't edit shit. This is real life. This is people. People want to hear that. They want to hear that. And I started getting into it, and the show's really about who people are, what they do, and what makes them great.
Mm-hmm.
So that vibe needs to come through. And I've had people on from Gloria Gayua, who's an actress who was on Grey's Anatomy for a couple of seasons. Guy who's become a good buddy of mine, Eli the Bee Guy. If you go on Instagram, he does bee remediation out in California. To flat earthers, to preppers, more business and self-help people than you could shake a stick at. They all I got some money to tell everybody about. But I've got all these different folks that come on, and I love it. This week coming up, so tomorrow is a show. I got a guy named Titus Walker coming on. He is the owner of esports league, and he's the first Black owner of an esports league. And they have an annual prize. I believe it's $100,000 prize at the end of the year for the winner. And it's legit esports. And he's the second esports guy I had. I have the guy who Byron Yoon, who's in Korea right now, I think, or did he just move to Japan? Either way, he physically wrote the book and works with like big corporations on esports, like for them to invest in. Like, what is the one? KPMG or something like that? It's something.
Like, are you talking about like the big consulting firms like EA Sports? Is that what you were?
Oh no, I'm talking like esports. Like, hey, we're playing a COD league. We're playing in a, whatever league, like that kind of shit.
Got it.
So
No, for sure.
I get to talk to these guys. I'm a football guy. I've had Beanie Anderson, Marquise Ogden on my show before. I've got to talk to these folks. Politicians, people running for senator and governor out in California. Shit, like, dude, I love.
That's for sure. I mean, I aspire to go to that one day, and like definitely, this podcasting thing behind the scenes, as we heard, like our few just like kind of internet miscues earlier, like this stuff's tough. Like stuff comes up, stuff cuts out, but like maybe people just want authenticity, and I definitely agree with what you're saying. Quick fall into that. So since like you podcast live, have you ever had anything like crazy happen during live, like people asking crazy questions or just any crazy experiences? I see you smiling, so I already know that there's got to be something interesting coming out.
So my buddy Nate, who we play fantasy football together with, he always says this. So I've had a lot of, the show Ghost Hunters.
I've heard of it. It's not on anymore, right? It used to be on.
I think it's still on. It's the guy who's way too pretty to be chasing ghosts and like two buddies.
Maybe there's like another show that I'm confusing it with, but yeah.
There's some that aren't on anymore, but there's this woman, her name's Patty Negri. Patty is like a big paranormal medium. I've had Patty on. I've had the only Native American paranormal investigators unearthing the paranormal on. I can't think of Heather's last name. She does. She's a medium for like pets and stuff like that. So any and every time, I had a girl on who has like some stupid amount, like 30 haunted dolls or something like that.
That's
like right that. Yeah, you're like, listen, whether you believe it or not, the fact that if you believe it and they're haunted, why would you keep them in your home? Like that's like, I'm allergic to bees. I put beehives in my house. Like, well, that's kind of stupid. But every time I have these people on, my show jacks up 100%. Either my internet signal drops out, or my screen freezes up, or, I have feedback issues. Guaranteed every time. If I have something of a paranormal nature, and it's nothing I'm doing, it's nothing they're doing, my show just jacks up. Guaranteed.
Can you do?
Yeah, what you could do is, you can keep a Star of David, I'll keep a crucifix, whatever we need to do. I'll say an Our Father. You can get into like, whatever it is. Like, we got to do something.
I got it. Not for sure. I think maybe like when those technical issues happen, like I'm sure you've had your fair share of technical difficulties. Oh wait, maybe it's time to do like the kind of mid podcast stand up routine, like while you're waiting for stuff to get fixed.
Well, and those things happen. That's the other side about doing a live show.
Yep.
Is I can't tell you how many times I've been mid show and all of a sudden somebody's screen locks up, and then the little wheel of doom starts wheeling over their head.
Crap, what's going on?
And I'm like, okay, so we're completely so I'll tell you a funny one. This is one of my favorite stories. I tell it all the time. So we had this guy on, and I can't think of his name right now. Nice guy, but he was in Montana. Mm-hmm. And I went like on this great tear, like through like comedians from Montana, movie directors from Montana, book writers from Montana. Like, Montana was hitting it for me for some reason. I was big in Montana. But this guy had wrote a book about near-death experiences. So like people who had died and come back to life. So we're talking, and I said, and finally I even said to him, I was like, so did you personally have a near-death experience? And every question was like, so did you have a near-death experience? No. Okay. That was kind of a long delay. So what inspired you to write this book? I was curious. Bro, like, and then at one point in time, I had a friend at the time who was a stand-up comedian and another one who's very into like spiritual like stuff and transcendence and all these different stuff. So I was like, you guys gotta come on. I need your help. This guy's killing me right now. I'm dying slowly on this episode. So they jump on with me. And every question Daniel, it was yes. No. And finally I said to the guy, I was like, are you talking to me on a 56K modem? And you probably don't even know what the hell that is. That's like dial-up internet. And I'm like, are you talking to me on a 56K modem? My man went, no. I was like, son of a bitch. And before we knew it, we were talking about Jesus and lizard people and like all this other stuff. And I'm like, this is absolutely fascinating to me. I'm like, so do you believe in lizard people? Yes. Fuck yes. So do you
just different, man.
Oh, it was so great. Like I've experienced stuff like at flat earthers. Have you ever talked to somebody who really believes the earth is flat?
No, other than like Kyrie Irving, I haven't really seen anything on it. Haven't
Oh,
no one.
Kyrie Irving. Yeah, that whack job. Dude, you get to talking to somebody who believes the earth is flat. The answer to every question is the same. They'll like spout off like tons of information that you can't follow along because they say it so fast. And then when it's all said and done, they go, but don't believe me. Look it up. Bro, I couldn't understand what you just said. Don't believe me. Look it up. What about the moon landing? Oh, all this information. Then you go, and they go, but don't believe me. Look it up. Answer to everything. Don't believe me. Look it up. Yeah, they're
Some
a lot
people
of
are
fun.
just whack. Yeah, man. I mean, look, I guess it's interesting to talk to those people, even though they might be a little crazy. But I guess that's perspective. Man. Quick follow into that. You've done a lot of stuff, and a few other things here. But like, how do you balance all this stuff? Like, you run your own business. Like, you got ton going on. You have the Above the Bar podcast. Like, how do you do it?
I have a good partner. My wife is amazing. The fact that you and I are here at 7:37, we've been talking for an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is holding down the fort. If she wasn't holding down the fort, you and I couldn't have this conversation.
That's awesome.
She's taking care of whatever's going on upstairs. When you and I get off the phone, I got to meet with my bookkeeper who's in New Orleans area at 8:30.
Mm-hmm.
My wife's going to hold the fort down. So that is how I'm able to do it. If I didn't have her in my life, it would be done. I gave my son this analogy. I was taught this analogy by Master Guns Gagnon. It's life is full of glass balls and rubber balls. And you have to know how to juggle them. And as you're juggling your glass balls and rubber balls are things that you can drop and they'll bounce back up into your hand and you can keep going with it. Like, hey, you know what? Didn't get the oil changed in the car. Big deal. Drop it. I'll go do it next week. And you keep going with those things. Glass balls are those things like when you drop them, they shatter. And if you try to pick up all the pieces to it, the other glass balls are going to shatter also. And then the rubber balls that you were trying to juggle, you're going to drop them also. And you can't pick those. So you have to know how to recognize those things. And I know how to recognize them for me, but I've got an amazing person who's my partner, my wife, who lets me see what's the glass balls and the rubber balls.
All right. It's awesome. I mean, we all find a significant other that can share the same view. That we see the same way that you see your wife. That's an incredible thing, and I'm sure she'll be happy to hear that whenever this episode comes out. But that's great to hear. So just the few other. Oh, do you have something to share?
No, I'm listening.
In the good mood. No worries. So just two other quick questions I had. You have this awesome story, kind of from the Marines to being like the train life, to kind of working in recruiting, to kind of doing your own thing now and running this podcast. What in your life brings you happiness, man?
Every accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
First thing that comes to mind is every single accomplishment. I don't care what it is. If it's closing a deal tomorrow, if it's installing new something into somebody's home, finishing a podcast, watching an episode of a show with my wife. My little guy starts first grade tomorrow, so it's I've just learned over the years, no matter what it is, to find joy in every single thing.
It's beautiful. I agree. I think, not to get too into my personal life, but I think, a lot of times we see that like life happens, a lot of stuff we can't control, and that, that's just how it is. So you gotta find the joy in everything. And, whether you have a lot or little, it's ultimately what's going to bring you happiness. Definitely resonate with that. And last thing to get into, is there, of everything you said, of all the advice, stories, shenanigans you've mentioned, is there anything else that you want to share with the people at all? Floor is yours, Shawn.
Um, for my final word, I would probably just say that, a lot of people will tell you this whole attitude of like, go do what makes you happy. No, no, don't go do what makes you happy, because if you go and do what makes you happy, it's probably not going to bring you any success in life. Because I'm really happy if I go upstairs and play Baldur's Gate 3 for the next like 8 hours. I will accomplish jack and shit in life if I did that. Would you agree, Daniel?
Yeah, fair.
But what I will tell you to do is go do things that you feel accomplished in. Now, could it be a video game for you? Sure. I'm sorry. But go find things that you feel accomplished in. And once you start realizing that, whether it's a career goal, whether it's an education goal, whether it's a personal goal of fitness, whatever it is, if you start finding things that you can feel accomplished in, that drug, that obsession, like we talked at the beginning, that obsession, you will continue on with that obsession. I know what that obsession, that accomplishes for me is, and you just keep doing it. Once you start getting into it and you start feeling that drug of like accomplishment, bro, it's so addictive. So addictive. It's the marathon runner who finishes a race and goes, I could do another one of those. It's the guy who goes out and is into long distance shooting. Man, I hit that target. I could hit a longer target. Find a sense of accomplishment in what you do, and you will be addicted to it. And that's real success.
I think that's an awesome parting word, man. Get obsessed with accomplishing stuff, and everything will fall your way. But Shawn, honestly, I have nothing else to say besides you're an awesome guest. I mean, this was an awesome conversation, dude. You've had like a lot of crazy stories to share, an awesome life. If you're ever in the area, would love to grab Shacks. But dude, it was an absolute pleasure on having you on my show.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.